Hi, I'm Finn,
And I'm Evan.
and today we're talking about
The outdoors.
the great
Sure.
outdoors, some would
Yeah.
say. And then here we are. Well, thank you for being here. This is episode 4. I can't believe we're here already, but here we are. And I think you were one of the first people that I talked to and asked about being on the show because we work together.
It's true.
We work at Classroom Services, which is the like equipment loan center at Western, like cameras and laptops and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, we get to talking about, um, I guess a lot of subjects, but a lot of the time about your adventures out in the wilderness.
Yeah.
I remember one time we talked for we tried to figure out how far away you could be and still be able to see Mount Rainier.
This was a great conversation.
And we did a bunch of math, I think.
We did. We were on some little calculator trying to figure out what the curvature of the earth was in relation to like how far away you are.
And the answer is you can, I think it's a little bit north of Vancouver,
Yeah.
and you can still see it if you're on a big mountain.
Yes, I saw a really awesome photo one time that was on Reddit of all places of somebody in the North Shore Mountains, which is just north of Vancouver, on a really clear day at sunset, zooming all the way in on Mount Rainier, and it was just this super clear, like amazing behemoth, just kind of towering over the whole city of Vancouver, and you could see like a little bit of like the lights of Seattle, the Puget Sound in the distance. So
Yeah.
I figure a little bit further north of there, you'd still be able to see it.
Yeah, the reason we had this conversation is because I went to Orcas Island, and I went to the top of Mount Constitution on a very clear day,
Yeah.
and I was able to look all the way to the left and see Vancouver, the city of Vancouver,
Yeah.
and look all the way to the right, all the way to the right, and see Mount Rainier. That was really cool. But before
Yeah.
we get into that, um, I guess I kind of gave away how we met. We met through work.
We did.
You started work. I've been working at Classroom Services since September of 2021,
Yeah.
which is crazy. So almost 2.5 years.
Yeah. And I think I started the year after you, exactly 1 year after. It would have been September 2022
I guess you're right.
when I
Yeah,
began.
you're right. Um, which is crazy. That feels a really long time ago. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so we met through there. But where were you? Was that your first year at Western?
That was my second year at Western when
Okay.
I first began working with you at Classroom Services.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you study? Well, I know what you're studying, but for the audience,
For
what are
the
you studying?
audience, I'm studying environmental studies with emphasis on geographic information science, which is a lot of alphabet soup for making maps.
ArcGIS.
ArcGIS, a whole lot of being on a computer and clicking lots of buttons for hours straight.
Yeah. I've never actually used ArcGIS, but I know many people who have fallen prey to that like vortex of
Yes.
study. A lot of environmental science majors.
Yeah. It's fun and it's supposed to be useful
Yeah.
for lots of things you need to create maps.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so you're from like basically right at the base of Mount Rainier,
Yeah.
like a little town. What's it called?
Yeah, I grew up in a little town called Ashford, Washington. I believe it's the closest town to any park entrance of Mount Rainier National Park. It's about 4 miles from the park entrance where I lived, and it's also the highest town in Western Washington that I'm aware of.
Hmm.
It's around 1,800 feet, which
Wow.
is not very high by like Colorado standards, but
Compared to everywhere else.
compared to everywhere else in
Like here we're
Washington,
at sea level pretty much.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was a good place to grow up if you really like hiking and trees and silence for about 3/4 of the year. Um, but if you were not into that, there was not much else.
So, how old were you when you first started hiking around? I guess, I have two questions. So I think
Yeah,
it's no secret, and we'll get into it more, that you're an outdoorsy person, that you're a hiking person. Um,
yeah.
how old were you when you first started seriously hiking? Was it just kind of right away growing up? And then my second question is, how old were you when you first summited Mount Rainier?
Good questions. Yeah, I think I progressively got into hiking over the years. But when I first started, it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because I was dragged along by my two parents, who very lovingly took my young sister and I, probably starting around the age of 3 or 4. We would every summer we would go on a lot of hikes, a lot of 1 or 2 night
Sure.
backpacking trips together. And apart from like eating lots of candy and junk food, I kind of despised it at the time, because I was always cold. I never had the right like rain gear. I never had like a sleeping bag that was warm enough. But like looking back on it, I had actually like a really good time, and I like have really fond memories of that now. Um, but we sort of stopped doing that. Um, by the time I got to high school, my parents got busier. My sister and I got busier with school, and but my like love for the outdoors kind of really rekindled itself again, I would say, in like 2018,
Mm.
2019,
Mm-hmm.
especially 2019, when I first began working for the company Rainier Mountaineering outside
Mm-hmm.
of or just in Ashford. When I started working in the equipment warehouse, that's when I like really started falling in love with the outdoors, as like an adult, sort of. And after 1 year of just working in this equipment warehouse, like repairing tents and packing lots of food and doing yard work, I saw all my coworkers who were climbing guides looked like they were so happy, like they were just psyched with their job, psyched with what they're doing, just like climbing this big volcano like once, twice, 3 times a week. And that was never something I had considered at all as like something I even thought about or thought would be fun. It sounded more like torture, which it is. But after one summer of working in the warehouse of this company, I was like, I need to at least try that like one time. And if I hate it, I hate it. But like I gotta see like what's on the top of this mountain that I've like lived at like the bottom of for like my entire life.
Sure.
So it was okay. So yeah, the summer of 2019, I was like I was asking my boss, this really awesome guy named Jeff. I was like, could you please let me on one of the programs if a client drops out? And the problem was, I was too young. I was 16 years old, which went against all company policy to like allow that without my parents being able to go, which there was zero chance of. So he made a promise with me that if I continued like doing good work the next summer when I was 17, he would allow it. um, then a little thing happened that we know as COVID now.
Oh no.
Yeah, that shut down, of course, not only our little business and the climbing industry, but like
But every little business.
everything nearly. So that actually turned out to be a great summer for me. That was when I truly fell in love with mountaineering. And that summer with my friends, with my coworkers, um, yeah, we started climbing the different volcanoes of Washington State, and I promise I will get around to answering the original
No, you're
question.
good.
But yeah, we started with the different volcanoes, like Mount Adams, then went on to Mount Baker, uh, and my third one was Rainier. And that was on purpose so that I could get like a little experience on like shorter, easier mountains to make sure that I knew how to put the crampons on these big like inch long metal spikes that you strap to the bottom of your boots, that I knew how to use an ice axe, which is just basically just like an ice pick that you dig into the ground if you slip and fall, so you don't actually build up speed and slide down this slope. Once I had learned how to use those things on a couple of the easier peaks to climb, then we attempted Rainier in early August of 2020, and that time we were able to make it to the top, and it was a really magical thing for me.
Sure.
I remember it being at like around 13,000 feet on the mountain and seeing like the sun rise over eastern Washington for the first time, um, which was kind of insane. It turns out that when you are on the summit of Mount Rainier, or like near the summit at some point, whenever the sun rises or the sun sets, you are the first and last person to see the sun in the entire state of Washington. So
Guess
like
that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, so just because you're at 14,000 feet up, even before like Spokane, Washington, or maybe even like parts of western Idaho, before they see the sunrise, it actually hits you because of that curvature of the earth. Um, so yeah, that was a really magical moment for me, making it up to the top and seeing that, and that's when I was like, I maybe I could do this as like my job. Maybe I could like learn how to teach other people this.
And it sounds you have been doing that.
I have been.
Yeah.
The last few years since then has been kind of my goal, or that was like really like a far off dream at the time. Um, for sure, was like, how could I ever actually become a guide? Like, you need to have so much experience, and these my coworkers seemed like so intimidating to me. Not in the way that they were like mean or anything, but like, wow, these amazing people that have so much skills, so much knowledge. How could I ever um, do that? But yeah, over the next few years, it was just really like trying to teach other people, teach my friends, and like learn myself like a lot more
Yeah.
of the techniques. Um, yeah.
How's that? I'm. s- This is sort of a rhetorical question because obviously it has, but has that intersected with what you're studying at Western? What
Ooh,
you're seeing
that's
is your kind of broader
that's a good
career
question.
path.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah doing environmental studies, and obviously we're looking at a lot of a lot of human created changes to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like almost no job out there, no, yeah, there's like got to be no job out there where you can like more easily see like really tangible human effects on the environment. Yeah, and what that looks like
It's
is
got to be either that or like studying coral reefs. Like,
it would be hard to, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, you've got a point.
No, but I didn't.
Yeah, no, no,
Not
no.
to devalue. Just like yeah,
Yeah,
like
I mean that, or coral reefs, or like
just
some different fisheries, like
yeah. You're in a field in a career that's just directly interfacing with nature.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, like I haven't been around long enough. I haven't been like observing the mountains and
Mm-hmm.
glaciers and snow long enough to see like, oh, there's been this really huge change in my lifetime. But when you're like on a mountain and you look at the glaciers that used to fill this entire massive valley, like 5,000 feet deep, during the last ice age, and of course, it has melted a lot since then. But in the last 100 years, you can see this like really clear line where a glacier used to be maybe 500 feet thick in the valley below you. You can see there's no trees growing anywhere outside of this bowl. There's just
Right.
like really sparse vegetation, um, and then suddenly there's this giant like empty valley of gravel that's extending for miles up the hill. Where as of 1900, or even like the 1910s or 20s, there used to be a glacier that was like miles longer.
Yeah.
or hundreds of feet thicker,
And
extending
now
from
it's just
every
not
side.
there.
Yeah, it's just entirely
Yeah.
entirely gone in these lower elevations now. And that's not to say that a lot of our mountains don't still have like huge glaciers, but you could see the scars on the landscape everywhere on Mount Rainier, in the North Cascades, anywhere you go in the mountains of Washington. There are these massive areas that you can see like, wow, like really clearly. Once you start to like recognize the signs of like where glaciers used to be, you see like everywhere in the last like 100 years they are gone.
Do you think are or maybe long-term solutions, um, or ways that uh, kind of this um, environmental degradation that you maybe want to address in either in some other field, but or just in um, like the mountaineering guiding? Like,
Mm.
do you want to focus on awareness, or um, are you really interested in the hard sciences, or?
I Where I think that I'm really passionate about is educating others.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think as somebody that in a role as a guide, like what we really do is we are there to like educate others and teach others, and of course there is like the product of like getting to the top of this mountain, which we hope isn't always the people's goal that hire us, but a lot of the
Right.
time that is part of it. But what I really really love about it, other than being in these beautiful places, is like the ability to educate people, to talk to people that haven't been in these environments before, that are totally unfamiliar with like the mountain environment. And uh it's our role to be able to teach about like, hey, these are the glaciers we're walking on right now. We can see if you look down that valley, if you look at like you look at that rock feature, you can see how the glaciers have changed. And you can see it in the last decade, huge
Mm-hmm.
changes.
Mm-hmm.
If I can be a voice that just talks to people, educates people on like the changes we're seeing, and that's not necessarily going to like change, alone what's happening, but just like making people aware. I really think that when people get out and see something and they form an emotional connection to it, they really care about this mountain, they care about this place, uh, they start to vote and take
Take
actions
it
in a
seriously.
way. Yeah,
Yeah.
even just knowing about it as a real thing, instead of as an abstract concept of like scary climate change, or like it's maybe a lot of people believe it's not a real thing. You don't ever see it in your daily life, so maybe it's just a political stunt from people. But no, I mean, if I can help people to see like this is something that affects our life. We depend on the mountains, not just for some pretty place to climb, or to take photos of, but also as like, this is where all our water comes from in the
Mm-hmm.
summer. This is what
Mm-hmm.
salmon depend on for like the streams to be cold. This is what we need to irrigate all of our fields, is like all this water is like, we depend on it. It's our giant reservoir, and it's also a beautiful thing that I think has the right to exist on its own, even
Yeah.
if it's not benefiting us, monetarily or elsewise.
Kind of that recognition of the interconnectedness and interdependence,
Yeah.
but also like that we're just a part of a system,
Yeah.
and that we don't necessarily have um, we don't get to, yeah, like it doesn't exist solely for our benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me what you brought with you today.
Yeah. I have a photo. Finn wanted me to bring something that has some sort of meaning to me. So this is I am really really into landscape photography, and have been over the past probably 3 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess in a very amateur sense, since I was like 10 years old. But yeah, this is a beautiful mountain in the Alpine Lakes wilderness called Prusik Peak. And these amazingly green and yellow trees that you see all over the foreground here are called alpine larch trees. It is maybe the plant that I am most fascinated about. It's a coniferous a deciduous conifer. Sorry, I sort of mixed it up. Meaning that it is a tree that has needles, but it also loses them every single year in October. And right before it loses them, the entire tree turns this amazing shade of orange and yellow, which is like the coolest to hike through and the coolest to photograph. But why I brought this photo was the story behind it was this October of 2022 when my girlfriend and I were here attempting to climb this mountain, Prusik Peak. And we had arrived to the top of this peak the day before I took this photo, actually. But around 5 p.m., we made it to the top. We hung out for about 20 minutes and then started our descent down, which consists of with your rope, you need to rappel down, which is basically you're like wrapping your rope through a thing called a belay device, which is basically just something that causes a lot of friction, so you can really slowly and in a controlled way, like control your descent, like sliding down this rope, and
Rather than just like shooting down.
yeah. And so you can control the speed you're going at instead of just like burning your hands off.
Right.
But what happened was after, well, we had to do, I think, five rappels to get to the ground, where you thread your rope through some chains. Like when you're at a big boulder, there might be some like chains, or not actually here. It was just like a big piece of fabric wrapped around a boulder, and you like slip your rope through a carabiner that's like clipped to that fabric. And then you end up rappelling down the rope, and then you have to pull one end of the rope down because the rope is only a couple 100 feet long. You can only rappel about half that distance each time. So you got to pull the rope down. And after doing 3 rappels, where I would pull the rope down and then thread it through like the boulder I'm at now, and then I would rappel another couple 100 feet, and then do that a few more times. On the 4th rappel, where it was now getting to be closer to getting dark, I'm pulling the rope down, and I feel it like fall a bit. I can see the end of the rope falling towards me, and then it gets like stuck, like 50 feet above me, something like that, between like something I can't quite see, but between like I'm assuming it had to be between like a big crack in the rock somehow. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is fine. I just need to like wiggle the rope a little bit. So I just give it a wiggle a couple times. I shake it back and forth.
To get it dislodged.
Yeah, I need to dislodge the rope so that I can get the end of it, and then thread the end of it through like the boulder that I'm at, so I can get to the ground. Because we're still at this point like 120 feet off of the ground.
So you can't just jump down. Like you have to rappel.
Yeah, have to rappel to get like the last 100-something feet to the ground. And so I'm wiggling this rope. I'm like, oh, it's supposed to fall down when you give it a good flip, give it a good wiggle. Nothing was happening. So I tried basically every combination of like swinging the rope you could possibly think of before I'm like, okay, I know you're not supposed to do this, but maybe if I hang all my weight on it, maybe I can like dislodge the rope. That doesn't make it budge at all. It's still completely stuck. At this point, it's getting darker. And I realized,
is Caitlin above you or below you?
Caitlin's next to me. We're on this like rock ledge. We're both clipped in to we're both clipped into like the boulder we're at, like with like a little leash of fabric so that we can't possibly fall. But we're at this point we're kind of stuck on this ledge. Like, come on, we need the rest of this rope to get down.
Yeah.
At this point though, my headlamp starts like flickering because now it's getting a little bit dark.
Dude.
And this is the moment where I'm like, oh,
I'm in danger.
Oh no. We had ran out of water too, because of course,
oh no,
at this point, and still, like, I'm not a very experienced rock climber.
Yeah.
I'm pretty inefficient. Caitlin and it was Caitlin's first ever time doing any multi-pitch climbing, and my first time ever like leading an entire climb on rock. Like, so this was kind of new to me, definitely new to Caitlin.
Yeah.
And so we were a little bit slow, a little bit more inefficient than I thought we would be, which I should have anticipated. But yeah, so it's getting dark now. The rope is stuck. So I'm like, okay, maybe Caitlin and I can like both grab it. And if we put all our weight on it and we like wiggle it back and forth and we jump down on this thing with like all our combined weight, no, it is entirely and completely stuck. So I see a few options here, and I'm trying to not panic. I'm trying to convince Caitlin to not panic, but we are now like 100 feet off the ground on a little rock ledge of granite.
And
It's
it's
dark
becoming night.
outside,
Yeah.
and we're at 7,500 feet on a peak in the middle of the wilderness, and there's like nobody around. So I have a couple options here. I can like try and like actually climb back up and get the other end of the rope. And I could have my partner Caitlin belay me, like she could put her rope through her belay device that she has and try to feed out rope to me as I climb higher. And I did attempt to climb back up with the end of the rope that we still had to get the other side. Turned out that about 10 feet after trying to do that, there was nothing, like absolutely no holds to grab. This is just a completely smooth
Sheer
slab
rock
of
face.
steep granite. I'm like, okay, so I cannot possibly climb up to dislodge the other side of this rope. So I return back to my little platform defeated. And we're like, we could either like camp out here all night and just like call for help, just like anybody.
So you have a little surface to sit.
We have a little surface where we could just sit and like shiver on this rock. We could like put a coat on and just like suffer all night. Or we could, well, I mean, this was looking like our only option because, I mean, we had one of those like in reach things where you're like, oh, I can just call for help, right? They're not going to instantly show up with some helicopter to get you.
No.
It's going to be, because it's not like a we're going to instantly die thing. It's going to be a team of people walking there the next day to help
Yeah.
you out, in all likelihood. So it's looking more and more like we're going to spend the entire night sitting on this rock ledge. Um, but as sort of like a last ditch thing, I realized that like sitting coiled up on the ground at our little platform here on our little rock ledge, I do have like a bit of rope that I was able to pull down before the rest of the rope got stuck up there. I was like, maybe this is enough to reach the ground. So what I did, is I tied a knot in my rope, like the like you know, using as much of the rope as I possibly could, like I'm not explaining this well. I tied a knot like wherever the closest spot that I could reach that like wasn't stuck up the wall, and I clipped that to the boulder with a carabiner, and thought maybe if I just like leave the rope here and like just leave it stuck, but maybe we could rappel down like the other strand of it, like the one strand, and so I like dropped the other side of the rope off the cliff, and I'm like looking down with my like very flickering, very dying headlamp, and it like looks like it might reach the ground, but I can't really tell because it's like dark out and my headlamp is dying, but it looks like it might reach the ground. Okay, so now I'm like, yeah, our only option if we don't want to be stuck here for all night or longer is to like see if this will reach the ground and we can get out of here and like leave my rope behind. So the issue is if I rappel first and get to the ground and it's fine, that's all well and good. But Caitlin, who is totally new to rappelling and climbing, being really tired and entirely new to like clipping herself into the rope properly, because if you get this wrong, like this is where most people die rock climbing, is they're descending, they're rappelling down their rope, and then they like clip something in wrong, or they like don't tie something,
And then it just falls off and you fall.
basically, yeah. So if I were to go first and then I like was like, okay, Caitlin, it's fine, you can come down, I was like seeing her like make all these mistakes, and we were both really, really tired at this point. So that was not an option. Like I knew I had to like help her to like clip herself in right and send her down, thinking like, okay, like I'm pretty darn sure this reaches the ground. And like very, very thankfully it did, with like a few feet to spare. She was able to get to the ground and I was able to rappel after her, and just leave my rope there. and I took this little video on my phone, which I could potentially send you later, where I'm just like, well, we're here at the base of Prusik Peak. It's 8:30 at night,
You
and
know,
there's my rope, and I'm never gonna see it again. But we made it. And
if you want to send it to me, I can put it in the
yeah,
and show it in the video
yeah,
if you
we
want.
were very tired, and I thought, wow, this is gonna be funny sometime in the future. And then we stagger our way down this ridge to a little alpine lake, and now it's like 10, 11 p.m. We set up we set up camp here on the shores of this little pond basically, and I had my camera with me, so I set it up on my tripod with the peak here, and unfortunately I don't have the exact photo with me, but another thing I can send you, there's like the lake in the lake right in the middle of the photo, and the reflection like perfectly symmetrical of this peak at night with all the stars above it. And I took a 30-minute exposure where you can just see like all the stars moving
Oh,
and like
that's
the perfect
awesome.
reflection. Like it was so cool. And I was so tired. Like all I wanted to do was like fall into the tent at this point, but I was like, this is gonna be the coolest photo ever, and it'll be like a cool story to go along with it. And yeah, here I am.
Nice.
But
Yeah,
that was
that's crazy.
that was fun.
It reminds me. So you've done a lot of national and international traveling to all these different mountains and peaks. Do you have like a favorite, like maybe the most exciting or just the coolest experience, or not like a full story, but just like the
Oh,
coolest mountain that you've summited
coolest mountain
or area or
or
whatever?
coolest area. Um, I would like to say for the purposes of that question, probably Mount Olympus, which is on the Olympic Peninsula, the highest peak in any of that range,
Mm-hmm.
which is not saying a lot. It's slightly below 8,000 feet tall, whereas Rainier's like over 14,000. Um, but Mount Olympus is really really awesome. The story behind when I first climbed that, it was right after my high school graduation in June of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
I went out there with a good friend, and it's just like the most Pacific Northwest experience you can get, because for the first like 15 miles, you're hiking through like the nicest old growth anywhere in the country.
Oh, it feels like Jurassic Park in a
Yeah,
good way. Like it feels like you're
yeah,
going back in time.
it's amazing. You're hiking through the Hoh rainforest, through the Hoh River Valley along this trail where just like most of the trees around you are like hundreds of years old. There's a few like 1,000+ year old trees, and just like so much moss, so many sword ferns, and just cool life everywhere. They say this valley along the Hoh River is the quietest place anywhere in America. Um, I cannot independently back this up, but like multiple things like claim this is like the quietest
The
place. So
vibes are there.
it's amazing. Yeah, but you're hiking through this forest that's like one of the rainiest places anywhere in North America. And then you get up finally after walking along the river for many miles into this beautiful meadow. And then you break out onto this like big gravel ridge called the lateral moraine, like the big pile of debris on the side of this glacier, on the side of the Blue Glacier, and you break out into this view where suddenly like you could never see it before, but now all of a sudden Mount Olympus is this like giant dome of snow and ice and rock just rising above you, and you finally get this first awesome view. And even though it's like not that tall in the scheme of things, like it looks huge, it looks like so beautiful and impressive. And although it is like a shorter peak relative to other things in the Cascades, it's covered in big glaciers, and the reason for that is because of its location. It receives massive amounts of precipitation, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, even though it melts like an insane amount every summer, uh, every winter it just gets replenished by the snowfall. So yeah, you see this huge blue glacier, just this massive tongue of ice filling the valley, all in front of you, and that's what you end up walking up uh, to get on your route to climb to the summit. And when you're actually up near the top, like on the top of Olympus, you just see like all the different layers of like the Cascade Mountains.
Oh, cool.
You can see like Rainier, Glacier Peak, Mount Baker super clearly, as well as the Puget Sound and the Pacific Ocean in the distance. So it's just like the
Wait, that's
whole.
awesome.
It's awesome. It's just like the whole experience where you get old growth forest, cool like subalpine meadow into like the alpine like cool like this moonscape of like just gravel and ice, and then you're on this beautiful glacier climbing up to the top where you just see like all the layers of mountains. Like it's the whole Washington, like it is the best of Washington experience.
How easy of a climb is it?
Um,
Because I know you've said like Mount Rainier is pretty gradual, or or am I thinking of a
Relatively
different
so.
mountain? There's some mountain that we've talked about that you've said is pretty gradual, like it's kind of just going up like a big hill.
I mean, that kind of is Mount Rainier.
Okay,
I mean, on the standard route we guide, which is called the Disappointment Cleaver, it is kind of walking up like a gradual trail that happens to be on snow and rock for
sure.
like 6 hours, and then you're at the top.
So, how
But
does
with Mount
Olympus,
Olympus,
yeah,
yeah,
compare to that?
it's not particularly harder. It's just that it's like a lot more of an endurance thing because of
Mm,
like the like 15 or more mile hike to get to the bottom of it, and then you have to do the same thing where you're climbing up the glacier slowly. But in terms of like once you're on the mountain, it's probably a little easier just because it's less tall, so you're not like struggling to breathe in at all the same way as you would
mm-hmm,
be near the summit of Rainier.
mm-hmm.
But there is like 100 foot like rock climb at the top to like get to the very summit, but it's like a very relatively easy rock climb, where like you still need a rope, and all that, but it's, I mean, relatively like quite easy.
Sure.
Where on Rainier there is no like technical, like there is no rock climbing needed. You're just really walking up snow and ice. But yeah, it's just longer. It's not particularly harder.
Sure. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah,
That sounds like a really cool spot.
it is a very cool spot.
Um, our time is actually almost up, but before we finish,
Yeah.
I asked a question that I always ask people as we're wrapping up because I think it's a kind of a positive way to end.
Ooh.
What are you looking forward to? Whether that's with anything we've talked about, maybe the fields, what's happening in the fields that you're studying or active in, or something in your personal
Ooh.
life. But what's something in the future that you're excited for?
That is a great question. Um, I am very excited to get back into the swing of things. To get back on the mountain this summer. Very excited for that. I'm also very excited to continue taking photos of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the last like few months, I've really been challenging myself to like get better at like other types of photography than just mountain peaks.
Sure.
So that's been a big joy, is just like finding cool forests all around Washington, and like trying to uh, trying to get good at taking photos like in the middle of like a dense old forest, and like how do you like turn something that's like beautiful to your eyes but like really messy into like a cool photo. And that's
Mm-hmm.
like a really fun learning experience. It's like putting together like a puzzle, just like
Yeah.
a fun challenge.
Well, we'll be linking your website below. But are right before we end, are there any places that you might be selling your art, or that your art might be part of some sort of event or something? I know you've done that before, so
Yeah, I really love the art community here in Bellingham. I try to go to as many events as I can where it's just like local community like art vendors. Whenever
mhm.
there's events like that, people can find me there. I'm also at a cafe called the 11th Hour in Bellingham on State Street. I have lots of photos there, and yeah, on my website.
Cool.
Yeah,
All right. Well, thanks. This is great.
thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I'll go climb a mountain now.
I'll take you up one. Any mountain.
You'd better.
What's your first pick?
My first pick. Um, I'll start small. Mount Chuckanut.
Yes.
if that counts.
I don't know. Is Mount Chuckanut a thing?
They call it a mount.
Mount Chuckanut?
Mountain. I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway,
That's where we'll start.
you'll see us on a mountain.
Yes, you will.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.